an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Red Sister, chapters 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29. In these chapters, turns out I underread a tiny bit last week, so I'm making up for it this week. Please forgive me. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Thank you again to Martin for commissioning this episode. I realized after I finished the last episode, I was like, that felt like the pages didn't line up properly. I am not totally sure because with the Kindle, it can be hard to tell, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct now. I think chapter 30 is on page 299, according to my Kindle. So I should be, if I'm doing 50 pages per episode, ending on like round numbers like that. So I think we're good. And there is, because I read a little bit more than usual per episode, I'm going to have to be on top of shit this time as I talk. So I'm going to not allow myself to stray into my tangents quite as much as I normally do. Okay. Chapter 23 opens with a discussion about touching the path. And this is something that has been mentioned here and there, but wasn't really like fully explained. And I find this really fascinating. So I'm going to read you this opening paragraph. I feel like it is just a nice summary, even though it's not just telling you what it means to walk the path, but you'll see. Touching the path is the second most dangerous thing a person can do. Sister Pan stalked the classroom with an energy wholly at odds with her ancient frame. These games you play with swords and knives, poisons and acids, you think this is danger? You girls don't even know the hurt that a sharp edge can do. A slip of the wrist and you're open to the world. Blood, bone, nerves, guts, all the soft wonder of a body cut through. If you live, the pain can last a lifetime. The loss. If you live. She raised her right arm and gazed at the stump where her hand should be, tilting her head, as if perhaps she could still see the missing fingers moving to her will. A moment later, the old woman spun on her heel to face Nona. I've told these girls 100 times, it doesn't stick. It's small matter if they haven't the blood for it, but you little Nona, you might yet do it. This ill-advised connection novice Hessa forged with you is a possible sign, not a proper thread bond, but an echo of one. Sister Pan leaned in and tapped Nona's forehead with a finger as dry and dark as a charcoal stick. There might be a touch of quantile locked in there, and all we need to do is find a way to set it free. And so Nona says, well, you said this was the second most dangerous thing. What's the most? And she says, leaving the path, of course. And she says, she asks Hessa to explain why that is. And Hessa says, when you step from the path, you have to take great care to return to yourself and not some other place. Which I highlighted this part. Some other place, Sister Pan repeated. Some terrible place from which you may never return. A dark place where demons whisper unseen. A hot place where your mind will burn. A place so cold that we who remain will see the hint of its frost in your vacant eyes. A silent place where time does not venture and from which no thing ever leaves. You must return to yourself. What else? What else makes it dangerous? And Arabella says you must own what you hold. And this Sister Pan is like, yes, so here's the thing. When you touch the path, you are filled with power. And you are able to do basically magic, essentially. There's like talk about doors that were blown off their hinges and rock being reduced to power and lightning and yada, yada, yada. But the thing is, as awesome as that sounds, you are overfilled with it. So when you return after having touched the path, you have to figure out a way to direct that energy and channel it into the thing you want to accomplish, or it will basically destroy you from the inside. And she's very quick to let you know that it's not a quick death. Like, it will keep you alive even as it kills you, because it embodies both creation and destruction somehow. And Nona was like, all right, cool. Well, as great as you've made this sound, I'm pretty sure I'm sticking to poison and to swords. Thanks. And Sister Pan is like, yeah, I mean, you will if you don't learn how to fucking do serenity. I mean, you know how to do clarity, but serenity you're no good with. And we know from having been in Nona's mind for this amount of time, that's true. Nona has trouble with serenity. Listen, in this respect, whoo, buddy, but do I relate to Nona? I have a problem with anger, guys. I have a problem expressing my emotions in the best of times. And I know that a lot of people say toxic masculinity is something where you are discouraged from sharing any emotion other than anger. That men are encouraged to show anger because it is often accompanied with violence. And this is interpreted as strength. So to be angry is a kind of emotion that still feels masculine. For me, I have trouble blaming people for things. And I know that this may seem at odds with how forceful I can be about just saying somebody is trash. But the truth is, in life, in situations that have mattered to me, when someone has done me wrong, it has usually been somebody that I care about a great deal and for whom I am willing to make a lot of apologies and excuses. And I do not like to show them that I am angry at them because I feel guilty for that anger. This is something I think a lot of people struggle with, especially when it's family and you have it drilled into your head that family is extremely important and that you should not hold grudges because you will regret it later in life. In some ways that might be true, but I think it also encourages us to not address the toxicity in some relationships and lets people get away with stuff that they should not be getting away with. So I am somebody who has squashed a lot of her anger in her life because she has felt this anger directed towards people whom she knew were trying their best. And I felt that I did not have the right to be angry because they were trying their best. Not understanding that you can appreciate someone is trying and also be angry at them and hold both of those feelings at once. I am a person that prefers to deal in black and white. The problem there is that nothing ever is, and therefore I will live in suffering for life, probably, because I can't seem to come to terms with the gray areas. I have a real intellectual appreciation for them and emotionally cannot cope. So for me, rage has always been something that I have dealt with and not effectively. It has been just below the surface, waiting for any incident to push me over the edge. And there has been a pretty long stretch of my life where I was just low-key waiting for somebody to start some shit with me because I needed to unload on somebody. And I wasn't about to start a fight because I don't like to blame people. I know that things aren't people's fault a lot of the time, or if it is their fault, it started so far back with the kind of trauma that I am trying to undo that I find it hard to fault them for the same thing that I am suffering from. And so I, especially in the current climate, have had my eyes and ears open for anybody who is being racist or homophobic or whatever, in some ways as an excuse to unleash rage that is in a lot of ways unrelated, and have not found it. So everybody just be careful around me, because I do sometimes feel like a time bomb. In this respect, Nona and I are alike. Nona grew up feeling unwanted. She was taunted, treated as something other, but also treated that way by people whom she relied upon and who were supposed to care for her. And it's clear that she has a lot of conflict within her because of this. And rage is the way that she is connecting to things. But that is not something that is within her control, the way that patience and serenity would be if she were to refine her abilities a little bit more. So this is a tricky thing, right? I really love this detail. I think that it's fascinating when we get a little further on how this works out for her and how it doesn't work out for her. And there is a real school of thought out there, especially unfortunately among liberals, that rage and anger are something that we really need to muffle and control because it ostracizes people that we're trying to reach out to. And I don't really buy that. I think rage is very important. I think rage is a type of passion that you can direct towards accomplishing things. You just need to be as conscious with it as you are with any other emotion. There is a sort of assumption that if you are enraged, you are also suffering a complete breakdown of control. I don't think those things are necessarily true. I don't think rage and control are mutually exclusive. And I am eager to see whether that's true for Nona or not, because she touches the path in these chapters and she does not control it. However, this is her first try, and it could be that she figures out a way to manage this that some of the other sisters have not discovered yet, or perhaps we're a little bit afraid to try because apparently experimenting RE the path is super dangerous, and it's understandable why somebody would be loath to try something out that wasn't prescribed by people with a lot of experience. So anyway, I find this very, very interesting. And the fact this nun is Sister Pan, she's just really trying to explain to them about the path, but she is quick to emphasize that she isn't able to show it to them. She can tell them generally where it is, describe it, but she can't make anybody see it. That's something that they have to get to and achieve on their own. So I really like this. Nona had come closest to serenity when running an old song through her mind, the one children sang in the village. She's falling down, the moon, she's falling down, soon, soon. When she passed the words over her still tongue again and again until every one of them lost its meaning in a chain of unvoiced sound, when she remembered the shapes of the children dancing black against the focus of the moon, in those moments she reached that calm place where nothing outside could touch her, where every memory was robbed of its sharp edges. It wasn't a state without care or purpose, but one with the serenity to rise beyond the reach of fear or even pain. Nona found it no use whatsoever on the blade path, though. It just meant she fell serenely and was less bothered by how small a portion of the journey she had completed in a non-vertical manner. So I like this. It's she has managed to almost get it. So it's not like it's a completely out of her grasp. But the thing is, when she's managed to do it, she just doesn't really see the good of it. It's just sort of like, yeah, okay, I did it. I don't really like get it though. So, and you know, that shit can happen. Not everything is for everybody. So there's also some discussion about how the students who have managed to touch the path are brought to a different place by Sister Pan, and nobody can figure out exactly where that is. And we find out later that it's almost like you enter a separate dimension, like a doorway that opens that isn't there unless you are on the path. And so all of the students are just like trying to figure out where they disappear to, because they never actually, they're in a tower and they seem to go down the stairs, but nobody ever comes out the bottom, and they've looked in other rooms and nobody is there. So I really enjoy this. Such a weird thing, you know? So they get interrupted in class again by the bell of Bittel, which is the same one that rang when the previous high priest came. Now, it turns out that there is a new high priest. I don't know if it's significant or not, but the new high priest doesn't have a name. I really I thought I paid close attention. Now, I'll be looking at it again as I go through it right now, but as far as I could tell, he's simply called the high priest and is not, because, you know, they talk about the high priest Jacob, and that's the one that had gotten demoted, basically. But this one just keeps being called high priest. I don't feel like he's called like high priest David or anything, you know? So they run outside, and there's a royal herald coming up. And it turns out that there is a woman named Sherzal who is coming, sister to the emperor. And it turns out Sherzal is kind of a shady bitch. Sherzal is apparently the one that, like, low-key tried to steal Arabella. She could even be the one that sent an assassin after Arabella. And there's like a brief, like, maybe she's come to take you away again, but everybody's like, yeah, she won't be able to do that. And it's just a weird introduction to this character who I don't really understand what it is that this woman is after. We'll see, but she is inordinately interested in Nona. And it seems like she becomes interested in Nona because Nona possesses some of the same, like, abilities and what's the word I want? Some of the same abilities and some of the same qualities that Arabella has. And she wasn't after Arabella because of who she is. She was after Arabella because she wants to do something with her. And apparently what people seem to be thinking is that Nona could accomplish that as well as Arabella could. So maybe she'll just go for the peasant girl, whom it would be easier to lay hands on than on Arabella, one of the nobility. So we'll get to that. So there's an interesting thing here. Nona comes into the dormitory. It's freezing cold. She's still really sore because she just got into that fight, which we are told later she didn't even see it as a fight. She saw it as a contest with Darla. And she's trying to find an unclaimed bed. Now, it's funny to me because I had assumed that they were all in the same beds every night, but evidently not. They said in Red Class that some older novices kept the same beds, but Nona had never seen it before. So this is the first thing. It is a couple of girls, it seems like a black girl and a white girl, that are in bed together. And Nona notices their feet sticking out of the bottom and sees that one is like rubbing the other, and she gets like really red in the face and looks away. It says she felt her cheeks blaze and looked away confused. And Clera offers to share her bed. And it says, you can share if you like. She said it lightly, but the words carried a weight even so. So what we're seeing, I am pretty certain, is Clera propositioning Nona. I think that Clara's interested. And Nona, I won't say is uninterested in general, but I think Nona's in love with Arabella, or at least is heading in that direction. And Clera is into her and maybe doesn't like Arabella. Like, Clera didn't like Arabella to begin with, but I feel like that might be a little bit more focused now because she's realizing that maybe she kind of has to compete with Arabella for this girl that she's into. So who knows? But I believe that's what's going on here. And I'm kind of here for it. You know, I had said last episode that I really liked Sister Kettle and Sister Apple being involved with one another, that I really like there being some queer representation in the story. And it's kind of fun to me how much it is taken for granted that these girls are going to get involved with one another. Like, it's not being treated in the book as if it's such a rarity. It seems a lot more common than not, because it's not like these girls are exposed to boys at all, for one thing. So it's only natural. People look for relationships, and people are sexual, and people need, even outside of sexual contact, physical contact in general is a very important thing to humans in general. And I appreciate that is just being treated as a matter of course. You know, I really hope that Nona and her feelings are reciprocated. I think they are. I get the feeling that Arabella is interested, but I'm also not totally sure what Arabella's viewpoint is on the, like, because Arabella was given up to the convent. I assume that there is no expectation of Arabella growing up, getting married, and having children, right? I'm not certain what her family obligations are and her duties are. So I want her to, like, be interested in Nona as well, but I'm not totally sure if that is something that she will allow herself to do, because I'm not certain what is supposed to lay in her future and what's, like, off limits, and what would even be, like, talked about or known by others, and what she could keep secret. Like, it's all very unclear to me as of this point. But Nona winds up being like, I just really need to be in a bed alone. I am way too sore. And she is, like, a little bit worried that she maybe hurt Clara's feelings, but she can't help herself. Like, she's not interested in Clara, and she's also telling the truth about her injuries. So they start talking about the threads, and this is really, it's like something that is sort of on the same wavelength as the path. It says, everything has its own threads and they tangle with each other. A trained quantal can weave one person's threads with another's, or with a thing, or an untrained one can do it by accident, like Hessa did with you. A mystic sister must have linked the threads from something left behind by the escaped assassin to some of our nuns. They probably used the twin to the dagger you got, which was why the link was so strong, and they did it so that they might be able to sense it if she came back. So reasonably, she's like, well, then why didn't they find the knife ages ago? And Era says, there are threads that will draw you to a thing that is still, and threads that will pull on you when a thing is moving. I guess they chose and tied threads that would pull on the sisters if the assassin was moving close to the convent, and that included her possessions, which they assumed she would be carrying. They had one of her other two knives to work with, and then when you moved the first knife, they came. But Nona says that the nuns were there before she even touched the knife. And Era says they say a really strong bond can give a premonition. Some things bind better than others, but with time, the threads always come loose. So this is the coolest. I am into this idea. It sort of reminds me almost like, and not really, I hesitate to make this comparison because it's not exactly a one-to-one, but it sort of vaguely reminds me of the concept of dust from his Dark Materials, in that like things that have more contact with human consciousness. In other words, a tree won't have that much dust, but something that a person makes out of wood will, because that has the intention and the consciousness of human attention and workmanship attached to it. And I don't feel like the threads are necessarily related to consciousness exactly in that way, but it sounds like you can create a bond using consciousness. And the fact that they can do it with objects feels like it would sort of pair in with that, as if like creating a knife imbues it with a latent ability to be threaded with something, even if that is not your goal when you make it. It's still there. I'm very curious if there are any objects that exist that you cannot thread with, you know? But we'll see. I just thought this was really cool and an interesting explanation as to why the sisters like fucking descended on Nona the moment she pulled that knife out. And it turns out that the path is likely why, was it Sister Kettle that like fucking jumps on her? I can't remember who it was, but she was like cloaked in shadow and seemed to like kind of come out of nowhere. Nona is super duper impressed by that and kind of wants to be able to do that, but she's told that she probably doesn't have the right kind of bloodline to manage it, because that's something that has to do with conjuring, which I guess she doesn't have a ton of that. Marjal, I think that's the bloodline that is able to do that the best. So anyway, yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. So let's see. At this point, Nona is like leaving class the next morning. Or wait, let's see. Oh, right. There's a flashback to her, getting like jumped on by this kid Denim. And the dude who stops Denim from continuing to harass Nona, because she tries to kick out at him. She tries to do all this stuff and it's not really seeming to make an impression. But this one guy comes up and gets Denim in the kidney and really hurts him and manages to get him to fucking leave. And he is the one that tells her that Partness's fight masters will tell you it's a science. They'll tell you keep a cool head, detached, control. He'll tell you the professional calculates, watches, plans. But nature shaped us, shaped the animals, predators, prey, millions of years. And she says, what have we got in common? Rage. We've got hate and anger and red fury, child. Saw it in you too. Got your teeth into that idiot boy. Didn't care that he might snap your arms off. Keep a calm head and you'll see more. But on the ice, we know better than to let go of the weapons so many hard years have forged for us. Keep that fire. Use it. We're wild things, us men. And when we remember it, we're at our most dangerous. And I love this so much. I do. You know, like there is something to be said for being clear-headed and rational and trying to use your intellect to suss a thing out. But sometimes you just need to go fucking berserk. Sometimes that's what it takes, you know? So they get woken up in basically the middle of the night by the arrival of Sherzal, which they treat it sort of as like, oh, well, royals just do whatever they feel like. But I really think this is like a strategic thing. I can't help but think a really nice way to throw your enemy off, and by no means am I qualifying that. I feel like Sherzal is definitely an enemy, is to show up unannounced at a time that they are not expecting you. So they arrive with like a bunch of different soldiers as sort of guards, And Nona is really surprised to see that, like, these soldiers look like fucking badasses. They are very young. They seem really strong and just kind of, like, scary. And when Scherzel arrives, she is not in a litter. She is riding a horse. And it is absolutely fucking freezing outside, I should mention as well. So they have, like, this whole welcome planned with the choir and all, but they can't keep it up because it's too fucking cold. Everybody just decides to go inside. And Nona is, let's see, as the voice is still behind her, Nona found that although she was still staring towards the statue, she was not staring at it, but past it. What drew her and had pulled her ever so faintly since her first night at the convent, sleeping in a nun's cell, was the foyer at the far side opposite the one she had entered by. Something there, beyond the dark marble pillars, demanded her attention just as it had that first night. A fullness, an otherness, a something. And at this point, Clera sort of gets her attention back and is like, you are missing everything. What are you doing? Pay attention. So apparently at this point, there is a young girl with the Emperor's sister, and apparently she is going to be admitted to the school. This is not something that she had, like, told them ahead of time. This is not something that anybody had agreed to. But evidently Scherzel is not somebody to cross. Ara says that Scherzel literally had somebody burned alive for making fun of her hair. So, yeah, she is somebody that you just don't argue with or fuck with because she... Self-explanatory. So Abbess Glass makes this giant fucking speech and everybody's like, holy shit, will you get to the point? And finally, Scherzel is like, she indicates this young girl, and says the child was the only survival from the town of Yidis after the Sithral incursion back in 2009. I've taken her on as my ward. I've had Zoli tutored and trained extensively by a wide range of experts, including Saphira, who benefited from 8 years of study at this very convent. I think, though, that the only place where she can truly finish her education to the highest of standards is right here. I'm told that Grey class would be best suited to her current skills. Now, Abbess Glass starts to say that's impossible. I am extremely curious why she says this. Like, I don't know why we're supposed to, as readers, I think, agree with Abbess Glass and be like, yeah, who does this bitch think she is? Just like rolling up in here, inserting this girl into Grey class. But I don't really know what the, like, protocol is because we haven't exactly followed protocol most of the time since I have been part of this institution reading along with what's going on with Nona. So it's weird. The whole thing is treated as if, like, this woman is really overstepping her bounds. But I don't exactly... Is it supposed to be that, like, you apply and are accepted usually, and that she's just trying to sidestep that process? I'm not really certain about this. But yeah, she winds up being overruled by Scherzel, and the abbess just sort of has to grin and bear it. And Zoli, we find out, is like a serious fighter. This bitch is not to be trifled with either, even though she is not using the same tactics that the other girls in Grey class have been trained to use. So she's good in a different way because she's extremely unpredictable and adaptable in a way that Nona and her classmates are not, because they are practicing amongst those who have the same training as themselves. And that lends itself to anticipating attacks because they are doing an attack that you also would have done in their place. Zoli, when we get to that fight between her and Nona, is just functioning in an entirely different way. She's like taking side steps. She's dodging things that she should be blocking. She's able to like utilize her weight and the movement that Nona is about to make to throw Nona off rather than absorbing a blow. She's just doing a lot of stuff that is, it's clear that she knows what Nona is going to do and feel like is sort of in her actions being like, oh, so predictable, you know? And it's not as if Nona doesn't land any blows, but she is outmatched in a way that we hadn't really seen yet, you know? So Ara mentions that Saphira, the one who trained Zoli, was expelled from the convent for stabbing another novice. And we find out later that it was Sister Kettle, and it was likely due to the fact that Saphira was involved romantically with Sister Kettle. They were in the same year. And then Apple joined the school, and Kettle got involved with Apple, and Saphira was jealous and stabbed her. That's the story we've got by the time I finish this section. It remains to be seen whether or not we find out more. And it turns out that story is a bunch of bullshit, but we'll see. And Zoli tries to say that that's like total bullshit, that never happened. Ara is like absolutely adamant. Sherzal has been hunting all across the Empire for possible two-bloods, chasing down any thread her academics can find. She picked up this one, she nodded towards Zoli, after my uncle outwitted her troops and got me safely to the convent. Sherzal would be trying to get her in with us as a spy, perhaps as an assassin too. You think too much of yourself. Zoli bit into her bread and swallowed in 2 chews. Highness Sherzal lost interest in you long ago. Because she has you, Ara snorted. Zoli didn't reply, just kept on eating. The others, tired from the previous day's labor, from rising early and from a long wait in the cold, followed her example. So there's a kind of a cute moment where it's really icy outside and Darla falls and Nona helps her up, and Darla like tries to be like, I don't need your help. And Nona's like, girl, look, we got a lot of weird people showing up. Let's just be friends. Come on. Let me help you out. And I really like this a lot. So I really, really enjoyed the fight between Zoli and Nona. And it's especially interesting because, like, of course, Sherzal is like out here watching and wants it to be Nona because she has this vested interest in Two Bloods, evidently. So they try and act like, oh, maybe Arabella can fight instead, because Nona just went through hell with Darla beating the shit out of her and, might have some broken ribs, at least some bad bruising. Let somebody else fight her. And Sherzal's like, no, I want what I want. So, yeah, this winds up being, this time when Nona landed, it was all she could do to pull her limbs in to brace for the impact. She rolled to the side to see Zoli already coming towards her with the same unhurried pace. Nona reached to slow the world's progress, but her grip on time's current was failing. Her exhaustion ran bone deep, and every part of her hurt. Anger flared again. So she manages to, force herself to get back up. But she really has to restrain herself because the blades that are in her fingertips are threatening to come out again. And she just cannot allow that to happen. I don't know who else has picked up on the fact that this is a thing. I am totally unsure what they would say or what it would turn out to be if she were to allow this out. I don't know what they would do. But at this point, Nona, in restraining herself, seems to be displaying a moment of weakness to Zoli, who fucking headbutts her. And Nona goes down, and Zoli just, fucking pounds the shit out of her. And looks like maybe she might hurt her enough to, put her in the hospital wing. Well, here comes something fucking bonkers. Arabella, it says something was wrong with her. She looked the same, but different, as if she were fashioned from something not of the world, a piece of stained glass cut and colored to resemble Arabella Jotsis, but lit from within, bleeding light in hues that the ancestor had never intended men to see. Ara stood staring at Nona on the sand, and Zoli above her. A trickle of blood ran from her nose, reaching her lip. She shuddered, or the world did, showing her in 3 poses, each out of line with the others. She stepped forward, or rather, one Ara stepped forward, another stayed, a third caught between them, each overlapping, one vibrating through the next. And as she steps forward, she punches fucking through one of the practice dummies, the leather, and like grabs the fucking wood inside and crushes it. Like, she is not here to play. And Zoli is just like, I'm not going to stop. Why should I? And Era is like, because I will do to you what I have just done here. And then Nona passes out. And when she wakes up, she is told by, I think Hessa that, oh no, Clera, Ara's in so much trouble. She went into the serenity trance and walked the path. Ara must have taken 3 steps at least, maybe more. Did you see what she did? Yeah, that's pretty dope. And I really enjoy the fact that Ara cares enough about Nona for this beating to be what motivates her to do something like that. That's awesome to me. And I feel a really good sign because I've been, wanting them to like pair off. So we'll see. So Nona spotted Zoli 2 places down, her tunic torn, small splinter wounds peppering her face. And at this point, it turns out that Ara, having walked the path and accessing this kind of power and threatening Zoli, is extremely not okay. This is like, breaking convention, breaking rules. And Scherzel is delighted. Because frankly, she wants an excuse to have to punish this girl. She's pissed. She doesn't like that Ara got away when that was the person she was after. So they assign Ara to be whipped. And Scherzel says something about how it's not really fair that Arabella is going to be taking the beating, considering she's supposed to be Argatha. The Argatha, so maybe the shield should do it for her. And everybody is like, dude, no. Abbess Glass, that's the wrong example. I think the high priest even tries to be like, I don't feel like that's appropriate here. And the high priest Nevis, he does have a name, my bad. High priest Nevis is like, basically here to do whatever the fuck Scherzel says. So him having to like step in and be like, that doesn't seem like a good idea. He doesn't really enjoy being in this position where he has to like contradict her. But Nona finally steps forward and just like, no, you know what? I'll take the beating, whatever. Which, again, how much Nona and Ara care about each other. I love it. So Sister Tallow has to give the beating, and she gives Nona a leather strap to bite down on. And Nona is just like, fuck that, no. Which I think is pretty baller of her. I kind of like the fact that Nona screams throughout this, because I sort of expected her to just really try and like hold back on that. And instead she's just like lets it loose. And I appreciate it, because there is... like, it can be really impressive when somebody just doesn't let it show that they're being hurt. But there can be an element of like, almost too much pride, something that indicates a different kind of weakness, of just like being totally unwilling to show that you're a human being, which, like, come on, we all know this hurts. It's fine. So Nona takes the first blow, and I have to say, this author really knows how to describe pain in a way that feels very, very real. The wire willows struck, left shoulder to right hip. Not a crushing blow like the ones High Priest Jacob had struck against Forefoot, but a cutting one, a shockingly painful line like acid, burned in and bleeding out into muscle and bone. Nona screamed. She hadn't set her mind to silence. She put no stock in sullen defiance. She screamed out the agony as a wordless curse, a promise of violent retribution, a vow that if Zoli or any other came against her outside the rules of the hall, she would cut their heart out. So, these blows continue to come. We get up to 10. I think she is supposed to get 20. She gets up to 12, my bad, before the path begins to really open up in front of her. After 12, like, they're still coming, but she isn't aware of them the way she was with the first 12. And all of a sudden, she realizes that her fingers are digging into the wall. Like, clearly the weird secret knives in her fingertips are out for people to see if they are able to. And she is fucking so enraged by this, that this secret has been sort of forced out of her against her will. The single path, spun from the threads of a dozen and more blows, suddenly snapped into a new configuration, a pattern that filled her sight, a single line chasing through hard angles, a corner, another corner, a surface filled with rectangles, a space filled with blocks, sketched in place with one bright line, a wall. Another blow hit home, and howling, Nona reached for the path. She set foot upon it and was filled. In just one moment, the path poured through her. An awful, wondrous potential ran in her veins, filled every void, pressed against the insides of her eyes, sang in every bone, bursting, consuming, bleeding from her pores. The fear of destruction didn't scare Nona from the path. She would have chased so marvelous a doom to the world's end. Rather, it was the path that slipped from beneath her, live and coiling, twisting away, even as she tried for her next step. In some complex space, with a dozen ups and 100 swinging downs, Nona lost her balance and stumbled back into the world. So another blow hits her just as she comes back into herself. And she basically knocks half the wall down. It was not intentional. It was not something that they seemed to see coming. And I don't think she put a complete hole in the wall. I'm not totally positive about that. Let's see. The surface of the wall had shattered outward to a depth of 4 or 5 inches in an area some yards across. Right. So she didn't go all the way through, but she did some fucking serious damage. And I love this. She gets escorted out and she turns to smile at Zoli, and her teeth are full of blood and she looks really fucking freaky. And that's one of the first times that Zoli looks like, oh, maybe I picked the wrong one. That doesn't seem to last, though. Zoli is more than happy to continue fucking with her. So what follows is a long convalescence. She is in bed for at least a week and a half because of this beating that she had to take. Not from Zoli, but the whip. And they are trying to stitch her wounds shut and put salves on it. And it's just really, really a long recovery that's super duper boring. Sister Wheel comes up and is extremely snotty about, basically telling her, I know that you think you're so special because of what you did. You probably feel pretty full of yourself. And you probably think that you're a two-blood. But it's not you that's the Argatha. Nothing good ever came out of the gray. Only broken things, peasants and lies. And basically tells her, you're way too fucking low class to be the one we've been waiting for. Which is just such stupid horse shit. You know what, bitch? I would slap you. I really would. And it's a weird like moment where she leaves and Nona is like partially like, I want to believe that she's right because I don't want to be the thing, but also like I hate her so much that I still want her to be wrong, even though that is not what I want for myself. And she tells the other sister, Rose, tells Nona that Sister Wheel came from the Grey herself. And there's just like a real self-loathing that must come from her with that. It's just really, it's like, it makes me so angry and I want to hit her, but also it makes me sad that she is believing what she believes, you know? So then Sister Pan comes in to talk to her about her managing to reach the path. And she's very excited. You know, this is something that she kind of thought was possible for her, but it just took a while. And she explains, like, you know, rage is a means of reaching the path, but it's not one that we recommend because it's the same as like if you were doing the practicing your blade path and you just came running in and leapt off the edge to start your walk. Yeah, sure. You'd hit it initially with your feet, but you wouldn't be able to continue to walk on it. And rage is a similar thing. It's so overpowered that you are not able to like access control. And again, I am not positive that she's going to remain right about this. I'm certain that's what she believes at this moment, but I don't buy that that's just going to continue on. I think she may be able to prove that there's another way to do things that they hadn't been able to access before. So the next day, all of her friends come to visit her. And I enjoy everybody like telling her all of the latest gossip. Era doesn't come in at this point because she's feeling really guilty about the whole thing since Nona took the beating on her behalf. And yeah, it's just kind of a sweet, I really enjoy that Nona has made some like real friends, you know? So once Era finally comes in, Nona actually apologizes to her and is like, you know, I'm sorry that I didn't beat her. And Ara's like, bitch, you can't beat everybody. It's fine. I should apologize to you. You took this beating because I was the one that fucking accessed the path and then fucking threatened her. Like, this is my fault. But what are you going to do? And Ara says, I should have just let Sister Tallow end the fight. But she took so long and Zoli was hurting you. And I really enjoy this. Like, I like the fact that Ara is just basically like, I knew that they wouldn't kill you, but I was not enjoying seeing you get hurt because I care about you, you know? And Ara says also, I wanted Shirzal to be afraid of me. She would have stolen me from my family if she could. Basically, she did because I'm here instead of with my family because she forced their hand. So I wanted her to see that, yeah, you wanted to get your hands on me, but look what I can do, and you should really fucking be careful. The thing is, now she's seen that you are able to access some of the shit that I can, so her attention apparently has shifted from me to you, and that's not awesome. I don't love this. Like, now you're in the fucking, you know, crosshairs, and this was not my intention, and we didn't even know that you could do this, and it's just bad luck that you managed to touch the path in front of everybody. Like, it couldn't even be something private, you know? And she says Shirzal doesn't want us because the prophecy's real. She wants us because people believe the prophecy, which is a very, like, interesting line, and I really enjoy that she understands the difference. Ara's smart. I like her. So then we meet Yisht. Yisht is Zoli's bodyguard. And Yisht is very compelling and nerve-wracking. Yisht like fucking threatens Nona when she's coming out of class for no reason. Simply because I think she recognizes that there's like a feud between the two of them. I don't know if Scherzel has told Yish to look out for Nona specifically because she is looking for a reason to get Nona in trouble, which certainly might be possible. But Yish is a fighter like nobody has ever seen. Later on, they wind up having a blade class, and all of the students have to go up against her. All of them, at once. And they like fucking barely even touch her. Yish seems to be able to anticipate every single move they make in a way that's extremely unnerving. I do not care for this development at all. So, yeah, this bitch also, there's a moment while Nona is sleeping that I find really interesting, and we will get to that. So, let's see. You're saying if I get this, I can do what Sister Kettle did in Blade Hall? I can be invisible like a Noe Gwyn? Noe Gwyn aren't invisible, child. Their shadow workers are so good because they focus on nothing else. So narrow an education is of limited use. In any event, the answer to your question is no. Only those with at least a touch of martial have the potential for dark work, and even some of them never manage it. And she explains that they're conjurers and touch the world's power in many separate places. So then she explains that the power that they touch isn't necessarily related to the path, and that the path is a source of all power. So if you're able to touch the path, you're able to do a lot of other things as well, that you're not as limited is what it feels like she's saying. For the rare Quantal with sufficient skill, the right training and years of practice, the energy gathered from the path may be held and shaped and set to purpose without end. The path is a line, but it is not straight. It touches and separates all things. So this is when she does the thing that the students had all been interested in earlier, where she takes some of the girls to a classroom that nobody can tell where it is. And this is the first time that Nona is able to find out. The three of them tracked Sister Pan down the tight spirals of the staircase. Picture the path, Nona. Don't close your eyes, but see it. Don't touch it, but let it lead you. So Nona manages this. She is able to see the line of the path across from her and like is able to sort of like almost follow and walk through something, and realizes after sort of coming back to herself that they're in this like weird curved chamber, which is pretty fun. I just really, really enjoyed this little reveal. And she explains that there are all of these sigils on the walls because they are meant to make the place safe so that you could practice walking the path without destroying things accidentally, the way that Nona destroyed the wall, and apparently another girl touched the path without having done it anywhere else so that they had warning while she was up in the classroom, and she blew out all of these beautiful stained glass windows, which is really tragic. So she is trying to access this power and take another step, but she has to be extremely careful about it. And the sister says, let's see, you should understand that what we Quantal do here in this convent is easier and more effective because of the ship heart. Where it beats, the space between the pieces of the world is narrowed. It is easier to touch the path here, easier to walk it, easier to shape its energies. Guys, I'm dying. What is the ship heart? When are we going to find out about this? Just tell me. Just tell me, please. We're almost 2/3 of the way in. When am I going to know about this? Someone help. So then we move on to the final chapter in the section, I'm out of time, but I'm going to just quickly wrap this. Chapter 29. And this is, she has managed to contact the path again and really like is sort of getting hooked on the feeling of it, the power of it. Even though it's like makes her shake and lose a little bit of control, it just feels so good that she wants to do it again. And she's distracted thinking about this. And this is when fucking, what's her name? Itzy? Is that how you say her name? I don't really know if I'm saying this right. I'm trying to find the Isht. She grabs her up and just basically tells her to watch her fucking back. Don't do anything stupid. Don't come after Zoli. And she tries to say, like, I'll hurt you. And then she sort of realizes that that's not going to stop Nona. And she's like, fine, I won't hurt you. I'll hurt Hessa. So go screw. That's low. And I detest it. And go to hell. So she's trying to sleep that night. And she is not quite able to manage it. And there's something happening that sort of is keeping her awake and like tugging at her. And she finally manages to like get out of bed. She's having a really hard time. And she goes to the door and pulls it open, and Ish is there and is drawing sigils in the air. And she doesn't seem to notice Nona quite immediately. But when she does, it's like she draws a sigil in the air that causes Nona to go back to her bed and go into such a deep sleep that Ara almost cannot wake her up the next day. It's not until she calls her by her chosen name, Cage, that it seems to like penetrate whatever spell she's under and get her to wake up. And that is fucked up. I don't know what Yish's fucking deal is, but it is extremely alarming to me that she has these abilities, and I don't know what they are. I don't know where they come. Like, is this path related or is this something else? I don't know. And let's see. The pattern of it sank into Nona's eye, pressing against her brain, the feeling unpleasant and familiar. Sigils. Without pausing for thought, Nona hauled the door open. They stood for a moment, Nona in the teeth of the wind, shockingly cold. Without a word, Yish lowered her outstretched arm, turned, and walked away. So, yeah, this is such a weird moment. And I should mention that this comes like after some other classes where they're talking about who is going to move on to, there is going to be like a contest that happens where they, like the best of the class are chosen to go up against some students from other schools, and they are racing one another, and fucking Nona always manages to win because she uses like her speed to like propel herself off. She's basically parkouring. So Ara manages to like wake her up. And the next day they have drills, and there is then is the moment where they go up against Isht as a group, and they are all fucking exhausted and sort of collapse after this fight because they're realizing that there is no possible way that they're going to beat her. And they've all sort of let their guard down when all of a sudden, I think Sister Tallow says, the first novices to touch the far wall are selected for the Cal Test matches. And she says it with no warning, and everybody is like, wait, what? And they all have to like force themselves up and sprint as they like out of nowhere. I really enjoy this, like dropping this on them without telling them. And for a moment, Nona sits and is like, do I want to go to the Cal test? Do I want to do this? And then she's like, yeah, you know what? Fuck it. Yes, I do. And she gets up and absolutely fucking blows by everybody and manages to get to the wall. And that is the end of chapter 29. So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. I want to know what the ship heart is. Everybody please help me out. But I'm very into this story still. So yeah, I'm liking it. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to wrap. Thank you again so much for commissioning this, Martin. I hope that y'all are enjoying the episodes, and I will be seeing you again soon with a new episode. So until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.